Sa ngalan ng Ama, at ng Anak, at ng Espiritu Santo. Amen. Panalangin para sa Espiritu Santo. Halina, Espiritu Santo, punuin mo ang puso ng mga nananalig sa iyo, at pag-alabin mo sa kanila ang apoy ng iyong banal na pag-ibig. Ipadala mo ang iyong Espiritu, at sila'y malilikha, at sa gayo'y mapaninibago mo ang mukha ng mundo. Manalangin tayo. O Diyos na sa liwanag ng Espiritu Santo ay tinuruan ang mga puso ng mga mananampalataya. Ipagkaloob mo na sa pamamagitan din ng Espiritu Santo ay ibigin namin kung ano ang wasto at makatarungan, at sa tuwina'y magalak sa kanyang pagkilos na nakapagdudulot ng ginhawa sa aming loob. Sa pamamagitan ni Jesucristo na aming Panginoon. Amen. Sa ngalan ng Ama, at ng Anak, at ng Espiritu Santo. Amen.
Ate, paano nagiging katawan at dugo ng Panginoong Jesucristo ang puting tinapay? Di katulad lang din ng baka natin, kulay berde ang kinakain na damo, ngunit pag ininom natin ang gatas, kulay puti. Sinabi ng Panginoong Jesus, tandaan ninyo, ako'y laging kasama ninyo hanggang sa katapusan ng sanlibutan. Paano ito mangyayari? Nag-iwan siya ng tunay na presensya sa pamamagitan ng Eucharistiya upang kahit atheist ay sumampalataya sa Kanya. Pakinggan po natin ngayon si Father Grace.
What makes the Catholic Church different from the tens of thousands of other Christian denominations around the world? It's the sacraments. The sacraments are not just symbols, but actual grace. They do something. The Gospel of John tells us Jesus said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And the Greek word used in the Bible is tragon, which means to literally gnaw or chew. Yes, the doctrine of transubstantiation is difficult, and even many disciples rejected it. But Jesus did not correct their misunderstanding and say it was only symbolic. So, are we cannibals by eating the body, blood of Christ? And what about these many Eucharistic miracles we hear about?
We are
No, we are not cannibals because we are not consuming the flesh of Christ's earthly body, but rather his glorified body. A true Eucharistic miracle occurs at every Mass when the priest utters the words of consecration to give us Christ's body and blood. But sometimes God makes it visible, like with Archbishop Jorge Bergoglio in 1996 in Argentina. At that time, a parish priest was told a consecrated host had been desecrated in the back of the church. Unable to consume it, it was put into a glass of water and then into the tabernacle to dissolve, which is the proper procedure. When he opened the tabernacle 8 days later, the host had been transformed. It was now a piece of bloody tissue, much larger than the original host. The host was kept in the tabernacle without publicizing it, and surprisingly, after several years, the bloody tissue had still not decomposed, which is extraordinary and virtually impossible to explain because no attempt was made to hermetically seal it or to preserve it in any way. Now, at that time, a friend of our Marian community, Dr. Ricardo Castañón Gomez, a PhD in neuroscience, took a sample of the bloody fragment and sent it to New York. Now, since Dr. Gomez did not want to prejudice the scientific community who would be examining the tissue in New York, he did not reveal its source. Then a team of 5 scientists was assembled, including the famous cardiologist and forensic pathologist, Dr. Frederick Zugby, who was the author of many books on forensic pathology. Now, he testified that the material, remember, this is the host from a Catholic Mass, was a fragment of human heart muscle found in the wall of the left ventricle, which is the muscle responsible for the contraction of the heart and which pumps blood to all parts of the body. This heart muscle was also in an inflammatory condition when the sample was taken. We'll mention more on that in a minute. And most surprisingly, the sample contained many white blood cells, which indicates that the heart was alive at the time the sample was taken, because white blood cells, they die quickly outside of a living organism. And the white blood cells also had penetrated the tissue, which indicates that the heart had been under severe stress and inflamed, as we said, as if the owner had been beaten severely about the chest, they commented. The scientific team then eliminated the possibility of fraud, which a critic might propose, for they said that it really can't be thought that the officials in the church had authorized the torture and death of a male with AB blood type, the same as on the Shroud of Turin, opened his chest while he was still alive after torturing him, and remove the tissue from his beating heart. That's basically what all the test results showed from this sample. But they know that that couldn't have happened. So then how did this specific piece of tissue make its way into the tabernacle? Well, solid medical evaluation showed that the sample had not even decomposed and could not have been obtained from a deceased subject like some cadaver. So again, what happened? Well, things then got really interesting. Dr. Castagnon attended a conference with the scientists and put up a picture of a piece of bread, a Catholic priest, and a Eucharistic prayer from the Catholic Mass. He said, if you give me a piece of bread, a Catholic priest, and this prayer, I will give you human heart tissue. Now, surprise, this was interesting because seeing that the labs where these same scientists worked had been the ones who reported that the sample that they analyzed from a piece of bread from a Catholic Mass was human heart tissue. They were stunned to learn that Dr. Castagnon had sent them a normal piece of bread prayed over by a Catholic priest, and now they were finding it was a piece of bloody human flesh. And they discovered more. Along with over 100 other Vatican-approved Eucharistic miracles covering many centuries, it was discovered that all these miracle hosts have the same exact scientific findings. For example, all studies reveal that the tissue corresponds to the myocardium, the muscle of the human heart, as we've been saying. But the blood also is interesting because all the Eucharistic miracles have hemoglobin and DNA of human origin. It was also determined in every case that the substance originated from the interior, excluding the possibility that it could have been placed, blood could have been placed from the exterior, as if someone had added human blood to the host and then called it a miracle. The fact that the outer part of the blood had been coagulated and dried for years while the inner part was still wet and fresh and still effused this fresh blood is unexplainable. And the blood type is always AB, the universal receiver, which again is similar to the host at Lanciano and other miracles, as well as the blood on the Shroud of Turin. Furthermore, the blood in every case contains proteins, indicating elevated metabolism in the person from which the tissue came, like that found, as we said, during trauma. And all the blood samples from the Eucharistic miracles have, again, as we said, white blood cells. So the tissue is still living, or again, was removed from the body while it was still alive. Again, all of these examples fit all of the Eucharistic miracles. Now, here's what is perhaps most fascinating. The blood has only one X chromosome. Now, remember from your biology class that in humans, the mother always supplies an X chromosome and the father can supply either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. So if the father supplies an X, you have two X's. The mother supplied an X and the father. In that case, you have a girl. Now, if the father supplies a Y chromosome, you have an X from the mother and a Y from the father, and you have a boy. Now, the blood from these Eucharistic miracles only has an X chromosome, meaning there is only an earthly mother and no father. Wow. If Jesus was a human person, he would have had XY, but instead, this blood only has the X, again, showing no earthly father. This is amazing. And the blood is always type AB, which is the universal receiver rather than the universal donor. Now, why would Jesus' blood be globally receptive instead of a universal donor? Well, in the Eucharist, it's kind of interesting because we are commonly, it's true, we speak of receiving Christ in Holy Communion. You receive the precious blood, for example. This means that anyone can take that blood type and make it their own. This means we take it into us and make it part of us. But actually, something greater happens. When we receive Holy Communion, we become a part of Christ. When we take communion, it is less about Christ becoming part of us and more about us becoming part of him. And by extension, more part of his body, the church. Christ, as a universal recipient, that means his precious blood is capable of receiving our stained blood into his body. He took on the sins of the world, so no sinner is excluded from being taken up into his divine life. And finally, remember the traditional prayer, Jesus, make my heart like unto thine. Well, it is literally true. When the priest says at Mass, lift up your hearts, and you respond, we lift them up to the Lord, you are getting a heart transplant. You are basically saying, Lord, I give you my heart because my heart is broken and hardened. And then he gives you his heart. Literally. The Eucharist is Jesus' human heart tissue, as we've been saying. In fact, have you seen the Eucharistic miracle from Guadalajara, Mexico last July? Yes, as you can see here on your screen, scientists who analyzed the video in which the Eucharist appears to be beating here like a human heart, they confirm that the rhythm and pulsating beats mimic the exact beating of a human heart. That is now your new heart received at Mass if you are open to receive it. Again, all we can say is wow. Now let's take a look at a quick clip of Dr. Castagnon as he was here with us at the National Shrine of Divine Mercy talking a little bit more about these Eucharistic miracles.
This reporting is in Spanish, but here says that name of the patient, unknown patient, only to say that we make a blind study. When I was with this doctor, I said, please tell me everything that you find out. I was close to him and he's looking through the microscope. He doesn't know that it comes from a host. Doctor, here is nothing special. I only see red blood cells, white blood cells, tissue, this and this, but there is nothing special, only blood. I was, I couldn't say for him everything is special for me, but he didn't know. But he explained to me, here you have white blood cells, macrophage, a complex of white blood cells, working because this tissue is also wounded. In this moment, what you are seeing are living cells, as if they would be in the body, working because the person is wounded. When I got this second result, I went to the theologian who advises us, and I said, Father, when we studied the study of the host from Argentina, the tissue belongs to a man who's wounded. The second host also belongs to a man who's wounded. And he said to me, Doctor, after 2,000 years, we do not know Jesus, we do not recognize, and we are still crucifying him. That's the teaching, he said to me. That's why you have a wounded tissue. With these studies, I would understand the priesthood vocation. I was an atheist, and I never fought with the priest, with the nun. I would respect always. But sometimes when I am with Catholics, I say, did you go to confession? Doctor, should I confess with another man as I am? I said, he's a man like you when he drinks coffee with you. But when he comes here to the altar, he's not like you anymore. He will say Mass in the person of Christ. And he's the only man in the world who can put bread on the altar, wine, pray to the Holy Spirit, and this bread will become the body of God. He's the only one. That's why when I see the seminarians or I see priests, I understand the special call, the special invitation they had. And it's more touching for me, because I am the man who sees this, but later I see this. I see the product of the consecration. That's why when you come to Mass, live every minute, but especially the consecration. I am watching all the time. The priest takes a piece of bread, any bread, a little bit of wine. This moment they call epiclesis, the consecration. And he makes only a prayer. And that is the very strong argument that I use when I am in a university to say, I will show you the place where faith and science comes together. You will see now. By faith, I believe that Jesus is present in the Eucharist, but I don't see anything. But after the consecration, some hosts bleed and become living tissue. And it comes only through a prayer. They ask that through the power of the Holy Spirit, this bread becomes flesh, this wine, the blood, and it happens. Then when I think that, and I understand that priests can do that 3 times every day, 4 times every day, any moment, then I understand why we should pray for the holiness of our priests and why we should stimulate vocations in our families, in our countries. Because without a priest, we wouldn't have this.
Magandang umaga para bukas, mga ka-blood type. Sa ating pagsisimba, mangumpisal po muna bago tanggapin ang ostya kung may mabigat na pagkakasala, sapagkat si San Pablo ay may paalaala. Ang sino mang kumakain ng tinapay at umiinom sa saro ng Panginoon nang di nararapat ay nagkakasala sa katawan at dugo ng Panginoon.